Okay, social insurance. So social insurance takes into account Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And we're going to cover some areas here. A little bit of detail. Some of it's pretty well detailed, but don't get overwhelmed by the minutia. Just try to get the concepts here. So once again, Medicare, remember, federal health insurance, primarily for those 65 and older. Also, people who have end-stage renal failure or people who have got Lou Gehrig's disease. I believe we covered that. The people 65 and older, as you're going to find out, get it with no additional cost. End-stage renal failure, people on dialysis or people with Lou Gehrig's, they also are eligible for Medicare. And anyone who's been collecting a Social Security disability check, SSDI, for 24 months will also qualify for Medicare. Medicaid, on the other hand, is not a qualifier based upon medical condition or age. It's a qualifier based upon financial position. So anyone who's having basically welfare, anyone who's on welfare very, very easily can qualify for Medicaid. Combination of both state and federal funds. We covered that. So now, Medicare has 4 parts. Part A is the hospital insurance. Part A, it helps Medicare recipients pay their hospital bills. You'll notice I didn't say it pays the hospital bills. I said it helps them pay their hospital bill. It's automatic and mandatory for everybody 65 and older. Warren Buffett is on Medicare. Bill Gates will be on Medicare. The richest person you know will be on Medicare when they turn 65. There is no choice. There are no options from private insurance companies to buy health insurance once you turn 65. They just don't sell it to anybody. So, automatic and mandatory. No additional premium. Be careful here. I haven't said it's free. Don't let the test confuse you. It's not free. We pay for it from the payroll deductions that we discussed yesterday. That 2.9%, half from your boss, half from you, goes to help pay for Medicare Part A. And if you're self-employed, you pay all of it. Part B is medical insurance. That's the doctor. It's optional, additional premium. Almost everyone who turns 65 ends up with both. Now, for those who turn 65, they're automatically enrolled in an A. And then Part B, they just have to request it. Just about everybody does. So those who have Part A and B are said to have what's called traditional Medicare. Traditional Medicare. That's for people who have A and B, the hospital and the doctor. So now let's get a little bit of an overview here for you on how this works. I don't know what your background is. I don't know what you know or don't know. I just have to make an assumption that everybody's basically at ground zero. So I'm not here to insult anybody's intelligence, but we need to recognize it. That's the way it has to be. Okay, so Medicare, traditional Medicare, operates on what is commonly called a reimbursement basis. It's a reimbursement plan. So any physician who treats a Medicare beneficiary can bill Medicare and get reimbursed for his services. And the same with hospitals. We're going to deal with doctors because it's easier to present and there's a piece of information I need to make sure you have. So let's assume a Medicare beneficiary, and that's what they call people on Medicare. They call them beneficiaries. A Medicare beneficiary goes to a doctor. Now, doctors have choices. Doctors can choose to be either a participating physician or a non-participating physician. Here's the difference. A participating physician has agreed to accept Medicare approved charge as full payment for their services. And I think you can figure this out. A non-participating physician has not. Okay, so here's what happens. Let's assume mother goes to a doctor who happens to be a participating physician. And based upon what he did for her that day, he bills Medicare $125. That's his bill. When Medicare gets that bill, they're going to review it and they're going to make a decision. So let's assume they say, of that $125 the services he provided, we're only going to approve $100. We're only going to approve $100. So we're going to reimburse the doctor 80% of that, because Medicare pays 80% of its approved charge. Medicare Part B pays the physician 80% of its approved charge. So the doctor's going to get a check for $80. And mother has to pay the other $20. Well, what happened to the $25 excess? The doctor has to eat it. The doctor cannot, what is referred to as excess bill, the beneficiary, because they have agreed to take Medicare's approved charges full payment. So they have to write it off. They can't bill her the extra. Now, if the same scenario and she goes to a non-participating physician, everything is the same except the non-participating physician can excess bill. So now mother's going to get a bill from the doctor for $25. She's going to have to pay it. She's responsible for it. There is a limit on how much they can excess bill, but for your test, if you see questions about this, I want you to be familiar with the terminology. So mother has a choice. She can go to participating physician or non-participating physician. And whichever one she goes to puts her at risk for some money. She goes to a participating physician, she's only at risk for 20% of the approved charge. If she goes to a non-participating physician, she's at risk for that, plus an excess bill. That's the way it works. Medicare Part A basically does the same thing with the hospital, but Part B, that topic could be on your test. So Medicare Part A, Part B, optional additional premium. That's traditional Medicare. And traditional Medicare has co-payments, deductibles, and co-insurance. We're going to discuss those in a bit. Now, not everybody can afford the co-pays and co-insurance and deductibles that Medicare, before I go to the next slide, not everyone can afford the co-payments, the co-insurance, and deductibles that traditional Medicare requires be paid. So what some people do when they have traditional Medicare, they will purchase a Medicare supplement policy from a private insurance company. We're going to talk a little about these later. And these policies basically pay some or all of Medicare deductibles, co-insurance, and co-pays. You notice they don't all pay all or some, depending on what policy you buy. The policies are identified by letter, just FYI. They're identified by letter, A through J or something. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to be asked those questions. And some cover all, some cover some cover very little. But they're all called Medicare supplement policies. And they're purchased from private insurance companies at a cost. Now, not everyone can afford a Medicare supplement policy to pick up those extra bills. So what some people do is they'll opt out opt out of Medicare, traditional Medicare, and they'll choose to get their Medicare through what is called Part C. Alongside of Part C on your slide, I'd write the words Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage. These are Medicare private policies of insurance, private insurance policies sold by private insurance companies, and they're called Medicare Advantage plans. So here we got a possibility of confusion. My God, we just talked about what? Medicare supplement policies. That's one type of policy that can be identified with Medicare. And now we've just talked about Medicare Advantage. Another type of insurance policy that can be identified with Medicare, but they're different. Medicare supplement policies, as the words imply, supplement Medicare. The doctor will bill Medicare first, or the hospital will bill Medicare first. Whatever Medicare doesn't pay, then the doctor will bill the Medicare supplement policy that the patient has from Aetna or Humana or Anthem or one of those other companies. And then whatever those companies don't pay, then the patient may have to pay the difference. Medicare Advantage is much different. Medicare Advantage is more like a managed care plan. And we talked about those yesterday. Managed care plans, remember? HMO, PPO, where the Medicare beneficiary now would be buying a policy of insurance from a private insurance company, Humana, Aetna, whatever companies are in the marketplace, and that Medicare Advantage plan, being a managed care type plan, means they got to go to a network. So it works just like we talked about when we talked about HMOs. If they're an HMO network, then they got to go to those HMO doctors. If they go to a PPO network, then they have more choice, the way it works. So the doctors under the Medicare Advantage are paid by the HMO or the PPO, that they're part of a network. Traditional Medicare, no. Doctors are paid from Medicare. So I want you to try to keep that straight in your head. We have traditional Medicare that might be supplemented with a Medicare supplement policy, or opt out of traditional Medicare and choose to buy a Medicare Advantage plan from a private insurance companies. And one of the questions you may get is, if a person opts out of traditional Medicare and chooses Part C, which is another way they talk about Medicare Advantage, will they still be in Medicare? Will they still get A and B benefits? And the answer is yes. The requirement is that these plans must provide the same benefits that traditional Medicare has. So I know all of this can be a little confusing, but if I don't lay the groundwork for your later study, it's going to be even more confusing. And if you have challenges and questions as you're going through this material, call me, get a hold of me. I don't expect you to become an expert at it, but I do need to get the groundwork laid down. I need to get you to be at least somewhat familiar with the terminology we use. So someone would not have A, B, and C. I hope you understand that. Somebody would have either A and B, which is traditional Medicare, supplemented by a Medicare supplement policy or not, depending upon whether they could afford it, or they would totally opt out of traditional Medicare, and they would opt into the Part C, which is Medicare Advantage. Now, Medicare, make a note. Medicare does not pay anything towards prescription drugs, self-administered prescription drugs. Medicare pays absolutely zero towards self-administered prescription drugs. Medicare pays zero towards, this is the key, self-administered prescription drugs. None. Some people get this confused, so I got to make sure you get it. If you're in a hospital and you have Medicare Part A or part of a prescription, part of a Medicare Advantage plan, well, Part A is going to pay for that drug that's administered to you while you're in the hospital. Or if you go to a doctor's office and the doctor gives you a shot or medicates you during the visit, that's paid for by Part B of Medicare. Or if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, it'll be paid for through that. But if you get a prescription to take to a drugstore to get filled, that's self-administered prescription drug. Medicare doesn't pay anything towards that. So what is available to senior citizens to help them pay for their self-administered prescription drugs is what is commonly called Part D. Part D is also a series of private insurance companies selling private insurance policies. These are called prescription drug plans. Prescription drug plans, PDP, prescription drug plans. Separate and apart. It's part of Medicare, but you don't get it through Medicare. You're getting your prescription drugs. They help you pay for your prescription drugs, but these policies are issued by private insurance companies. You have to pay premium for it, and then you can get some assistance in paying for your self-administered prescription drugs. So what are the possibilities? Let's go back. Somebody's on traditional Medicare. They got A and B. They most likely would want to get a Part D just so they can get help paying for their prescription drugs. If they opt out of traditional Medicare, then they get Part C. That's called Medicare Advantage. And those Part C plans, Medicare Advantage, automatically include Part D. So the Medicare Advantage plans that people buy, Medicare Advantage, automatically bundle together the prescription drug part. So they call them MAPD. So what do we got? Traditional Medicare, Part D, maybe a Medicare supplement policy. Opt out of that, go to Medicare Advantage. That automatically includes the Part D plan. So you've got MAPD. You don't need a Medicare supplement policy. A lot of people choose Medicare Advantage plans because it's easier for them to budget their health care costs. That's a lot to remember. Let's talk more about what hospital insurance covers. Hospital insurance covers inpatient hospital bills. Helps cover hospital bills, inpatient. Also will help pay for inpatient skilled nursing care. It'll help pay for home health care. We discussed the limitations on home health care yesterday. Medicare Part A also has a hospice benefit. Hospice is a plan of treatment, not a place. Hospice is a plan of treatment, not a place. So let's talk about, just to recap. So how do you qualify for Part A? Got to be a citizen or have a legitimate green card. Forget about the second bullet. You just got to be 65 or older. But the last three may show up on your test. If they're under 65, they can still qualify if they meet one of those last three criteria. And one of them says what? On SSDI for 24 months. In other words, they'll be collecting a Social Security disability check for 24 months. Or they're on dialysis, or they've contracted what is commonly called Lou Gehrig's disease, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So it's not always for people 65 and older. These three sets of folks right here will get it even though they're not 65. So let's talk about the Medicare Part A benefit, how Medicare Part A actually functions in the life of a senior citizen. This is not like anything you've ever seen or experienced unless you know someone that's been through it. Medicare Part A operates on what is called a benefit period. And if you look at my slide, look at the first bullet and the last bullet. It says the benefit period starts upon admission to a hospital. and it ends once you've been discharged for 60 consecutive days. So unless a person's been discharged for 60 consecutive days, they will remain in that benefit period. So once you get admitted to a hospital under Medicare Part A, Medicare will pay 100% of the first 60 days. You don't need to know the number. I'm just kind of giving you an idea. It doesn't pay for TVs, telephones, and private duty nurses. Hospitals have gotten wise to that, so they no longer bill separately for TVs and telephones. So Medicare still pays for it. And then Medicare Part A has another section, Part 30 days, 60 days. There's 150 days in a benefit period. So my next slide is probably a little easier to see. So let's create a scenario. Let's assume mother falls and breaks her hip. She's on Medicare. She falls and breaks her hip. She's got to go to the hospital. She presents that little red, white, blue Medicare card that they give her, and first thing that happens, she must pay a benefit period deductible. You don't need to know the number. They change it every year. I just have it there as a point of reference. So the first thing she's got to do is come up with the deductible. I mean, she might be able to negotiate it with the hospital, but she's required to pay the deductible. Of course, it doesn't pay TVs, telephones, or private duty nurses. But if you'll notice, Medicare is going to pay 100% of the bill for the first 60 days. So a mother, remember, has fallen and broken her hip. She's had an operation, replaced her hip, and she said, let's assume she's had a ton of complications, and she's not able to get discharged. She just can't get out of the hospital. It's been terrible. So she's there for 60 consecutive days. She's there for 60 days, and they finally got her stabilized and sent her home. 2 weeks later, she falls down. She comes down with pneumonia. 2 weeks after she got out of the hospital, she comes down with pneumonia. She's got to go back into the hospital. Well, she's got some good news and some bad news. The good news is she's still in the same benefit period, so she does not have to worry about her deductible. The not so good news is over here, she's in the next 30 days of her benefit period, where Medicare pays a major part, but the beneficiary's got to make a copay, and right now it's closer to $300 a day. So let's assume mother has some real complications with her pneumonia, and she has to lay there for 30 days before they can stabilize her because they're afraid if they send her home, she's going to die. So they manage to stabilize her after 30 days. She owes the hospital about $300 for every day. That's like $9,000. I don't know where she's getting the money from, but maybe that's probably more than 9,000, like 90,000. I never did the math until just now. $300 a day for 30 days. Yeah, that's $9,000. That's a lot of money. But she's responsible for it because Medicare's not paying that part. Well, she manages to sell off her house and sell her jewelry, and she manages to pay that bill. She goes home. And wouldn't you know it, 2 weeks later, she falls down the stairs and breaks her other hip. Back in the hospital. Well, she's not been home for 60 consecutive days, so now she's in the last 60 days of her benefit period. These are referred to as lifetime reserve days. There are 60 of them. And now Medicare pays less than before because now the amount she has to pay is double what it was here. So if she was paying $300 here, she's paying $600 here. So you can begin to see that Medicare sucks. What I need you to take away from this is Medicare has a maximum benefit period of 150 days. And after 150 days have been used up, Medicare pays nothing, zero. And it doesn't mean you have to be in the hospital 150 consecutive days, as I've just explained to you. You could have been in and then discharged and back in and discharged. That 150 days could be used up over a course of a year and a half. So Medicare has a maximum benefit period of 150 days. The benefit period begins when you're admitted to a hospital. At that point, they got to pay a benefit period deductible. The benefit period doesn't end until you've been discharged for 60 consecutive days. So if mother were discharged or home for 60 consecutive days after any one of those bouts that we talked about, she would cycle back to the beginning and start over here. So she can always start over here, but she has to be home for 60 consecutive days. And that causes a lot of senior citizens, when they're aware of it, to not go back into the hospital until they can use up that 60 day of discharge so they can go back in and start to the beginning. Not necessarily good for their health, but that's the way it works. Part A also has a skilled nursing benefit. 100 days per benefit period. That could be a test question. Medicare Part A has a 100-day skilled nursing benefit per benefit period. 20 days in full, Medicare will pay 20 days in full, and the last 80 days, there's a copay. So when mother went to the hospital with a broken hip, when they finally discharged her, they would have discharged her to a skilled nursing facility where she would learn how to walk again. That's where this benefit would come into play. So she's already paid the deductible, so now she's in the nursing home, and Medicare will pay 100% of the first 20 days where they teach her to learn how to walk. That's the way it works. That's generally not on the test anymore, but that's just worth noting that there's a prerequisite to get this 100 days per benefit period, and the prerequisite is the Medicare beneficiary had to have been in a hospital for at least 3 consecutive days somewhere in the last 30. So that'll make this easy. Medicare also has a home health care benefit. We already talked about home health care when we talk about long-term care. Same type of care. But this is what the key is. An unlimited number of visits. Unlimited number of visits. Now, this is not like a mother-in-law visit where they come and they stay and never go home. Now, they come in, they do something that's medically necessary, and they leave. That's unlimited number of visits. Medicare is pretty generous with this part. However, those visits must be provided by a Medicare-approved home health care agency. You just can't call up your sister-in-law who's a nurse and have her come in and have Medicare pay for it. Not going to work. It's got to be provided by a Medicare-approved home health care agency. And as we said earlier, Medicare Part A also has a hospice benefit. And I said to you, the hospice is a plan of treatment, not a place. Hospice is a plan of treatment that is utilized to help relieve pain and suffering when someone is terminally ill. You can ignore the 210 days. I should really get rid of that. Matter of fact, let me do that right now. It's one of the things I really want to get rid of. What am I doing here? What happened? What happened to my slide? There we go. Let me get rid of this. Okay. So, hospice is a plan of treatment to help relieve pain and suffering. Hospice also provides a respite benefit for the caregiver. We discussed respite when we talked about long-term care. Remembering respite care is for the caregiver, not for the patient. So you could have a terminally ill patient at home being cared for by an adult child who might need a break. So at that point, Medicare would be willing to pay to bring mother or dad, terminally ill mother or dad, to a place while the caregiver takes a break, or they'll send somebody in to take the caregiver's place for a short period of time. Part B, medical. Now, that was hospital. Part B, medical. Remember, optional additional premium. It's not already paid for. Additional premium. Don't worry about the cost. You're not going to be asked. Pays the doctor. Now, Medicare Part B works differently than A. Medicare Part B works more like a traditional health insurance policy we've already discussed, where there's an annual deductible. The amount is not important. I just have that number again there for you to use as a point of reference. So Medicare Part B utilizes an annual benefit period rather than a benefit period that limits to 150 days. It's a little weird. So there's an annual deductible. Once the Medicare beneficiary has paid that deductible for the year to the doctors, then Medicare will pay 80% of its approved charge. 80% of its approved charge, which we've already discussed. And then Medicare beneficiary is responsible for the other 20. And there's no out-of-pocket limit on that beneficiary's 20%. So if my approved doctor charges this year are $100,000, I'm on the hook for 20 grand, which is why people turn to Medicare supplement policies to pick up that bill, or buy Medicare Advantage plans to mitigate that bill significantly. I'm not going to get into all the details of the benefits of all of those, but that's what those private plans do. They mitigate the costs that Medicare imposes on people, but they're private plans of insurance issued by private insurance companies. And Part B will pay for prescription drugs, but only if administered by a physician. That's what? Not self-administered, right? And I have A and B in parentheses to remind you that would also apply to prescription drugs provided while a person is in a hospital. But Medicare doesn't pay for any self-administered prescription drugs. That's what Part D is for. Part C, Medicare Advantage. So let's recap a couple of bullet points. These are managed care plans, HMOs and PPOs, purchased from private insurance companies. The beneficiary is still in Medicare. And the reason why a lot of senior citizens, and I do a lot of business with senior citizens on Medicare, that's been the heart of my practice for the last 8 or 9 years. And the 95%, I should say, of all of my clients are on Medicare Advantage. It's a lot easier for them to budget their health care costs. The premiums they pay can be as low as $0 a month. You can't get it any cheaper than $0 a month. Sometimes they run up to $35 or $40 a month. And the out-of-pocket costs are relatively inexpensive. $15, $20 copay, $40 copay. So it's a little easier for them to budget their health care costs. And if they're broke, if they're old and broke, that's what Medi stands for. Medicare, old, Medicaid, broke, old and broke. If there are any costs, they're also picked up by Medicaid. So it's a lot easier to deal with their health care costs than, say, in traditional Medicare. Medicare Advantage plans are awesome. Then we have prescription drug plans. Private insurance companies sell them. Optional. Don't have to have it if you don't want it. But there's a 1% penalty if you're late. You're supposed to enroll within 6 months of enrolling in Part B. Well, that Part B, remember, was optional. So not everybody enrolls right away, but almost everybody else. But 6 months from the time they enroll in Part B, they have to select a Medicare Part D plan if they want to get it without a penalty. If they wait beyond that 6-month window, they pay a 1% penalty for every month they wait. Here's how it works. 1% of what? 1% of the average monthly national premium for all Medicare Advantage plans. Right now, that number is approximately $35 a month. And 1% of $35 doesn't sound like a whole lot of money. It's 35 cents. But you have to multiply that times the number of months they were late. And what happens is that many senior citizens at age 65 they're a healthier group than the 65-year-olds of 20 years ago. So the medications they may be on aren't that expensive, and they may be getting them from Walmart or Walgreens for $8, $9, $10 a month. So why would I want to spend $35 a month for something that I'm already getting for $4 to $12 a month? But later on, when they get more expensive drugs, as they get older, they need more expensive drugs. They say, oh, I really need to get that Part D plan. Well, they're going to pay a penalty. And many of them wait as much as 5 years. So you multiply, I'm not going to do it for you. You multiply 35 cents times 60, that's at least 18 bucks. Now, 18 bucks doesn't sound like a lot, but then you add that to the what? The $35 average, and now they're paying more than they should. Not an issue for your test. I know you say, well, why did you tell me, Lou? Because you may know somebody that's on Medicare who hasn't picked up a prescription drug plan because they think it's too expensive. Well, it's a lot more expensive to wait. That's why. So, Medicare Part D prescription drug plans are optional, but there's a 1%. You may need to know the 1% if they are late. They got to be in Medicare. That's all that's about. None of that's on the test. Okay, primary, secondary payer. Questions about coordination of benefits. There are a number of senior citizens, 65 and older, that are still working. You may know some of them. And they may have group insurance at work. So now they have two insurance policies, the group insurance at work and the Medicare Part A, which they get automatic and mandatory. They have no choice. Well, they're not going to collect twice. So there's what's called a coordination of benefits provision. And if this were the case, where they're working on a job, they got group insurance at work, and they have Medicare Part A, the group plan at work will be the primary payer. And then Medicare will pay up to its limits whatever the group plan at work doesn't pay. And maybe a question about the coordination of benefits between Medicare beneficiaries who are working and have group insurance at work. The employer who's got that person working for him cannot offer any incentive for that beneficiary to drop the group plan. Be careful. That bullet doesn't say the beneficiary couldn't drop the group plan if they want to. They can drop it if they want to, but the employer can't offer any incentive to drop the group plan. It's not recommended, by the way, that they drop the group plan, but they could. But the question revolves around the employer not offering an incentive. So we touched on MedSup earlier. They're also referred to as Medigap. They fill the gaps that Medicare doesn't pay. So I typed this out earlier, but here it is on your slide. Medigap pays some or all of Medicare deductibles, co-insurance, and copays. They're offered by private insurance companies. Now, all Medicare supplement policies are standardized. Each one is a separate letter. Each separate letter represents a different set of benefits. But every one of those of the same letter must be the same. They're set in stone. The standards were set by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. I think we talked about those egomaniacs yesterday. So the NAIC was given the task by government to standardize Medicare supplement policies so senior citizens wouldn't be confused about what's what. So there would be some standardization, and it would be easier for senior citizens to make selections, and they wouldn't be confused. It's all about how much coverage do you want and how much can you afford to pay. Now, this particular part shows up on a test. Medicare supplement policies are sold by private insurance companies. And very often, almost as much as possible, private insurance companies want that person to be medically underwritten. They want them to be qualified medically to get the policy. They don't want a bunch of sickos getting their policies. However, there's a law that requires Medicare supplement policies to be issued to any senior citizen without regard to their health, and they can't charge them more money because they have a health problem, as long as they buy that Medicare supplement policy within 6 months of enrolling in Part B. That's what that bullet is saying. There are no medical requirements for any senior citizen to get a Medicare supplement policy if the beneficiary buys the MedSup policy within 6 months of enrolling in Part B. You might get that on a test. The plans, don't worry about the plans. I'm just kind of giving you an overview here. They run from A to L. all plans must have certain core benefits. We're not going to get into it. It's not covered on the test, so we're going to jump out of there. Medicaid. Medicaid, as we said, is what? Health insurance for the poor. It's a combination of state and federal funding. Now, here's a fact that may be on your test. Medicaid will help those on Medicaid cover their long-term care costs. Long-term care is what? The need for assistance with the activities of daily living. We're not talking about acute care. We're talking about custodial care. Make a note here. I'm going to give this to you again. Make a note. Medicare. Medicare pays absolutely zero towards long-term care. Nothing. Medicaid does. That's why you have to have those words straight in your mind. Medicare pays zero towards long-term care. Medicaid does pay for the long-term care needs of those people on Medicaid. Care for the elderly, aid the poor. So that 200-day per benefit period nursing is not very long. If you remember our definition, long-term care policies must provide a benefit for at least 12 consecutive months in a setting other than the acute care unit of a hospital. So Medicare doesn't pay anything towards long-term care. Read your question carefully. It's Medicaid that does that. So how does it do that? Well, Medicaid will cover long-term care needs if that person is obviously a U.S. citizen or they got a legitimate green card, and they must go to a nursing home. They're not going to be allowed to stay in their home. They must go to a nursing home. And in one of my live classes one day, somebody said, doesn't that cost more than take care of them at home? I said, well, think of it this way. What's more expensive? Go to a gym or have a private trainer? See, it costs more money to send somebody one-on-one to somebody's house than it does to warehouse people. I know that's kind of a cold way to put it, but that's the reality. So Medicaid will help senior citizens who need assistance with the activities of daily living, help pay for that, but they must go to a nursing home. One of the other topics we talked about is SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. I don't believe we covered this material, so we're going to cover it. Does anybody remember if we covered this or not? I don't think we did. Okay. How does somebody qualify to get a Social Security Disability income check? Very tough. The most restrictive definition almost that exists. First of all, somebody has to be classified as fully insured. What does that mean? That means they have to earn enough money in 40 calendar quarters over their lifetime. That 40 quarters doesn't mean 40 25-cent pieces, right? They have to earn enough money in 40 calendar quarters over a lifetime. The amount of money it takes to earn a quarter in 2017 is more than it was in 1950. So that number changes. You're not going to be asked the number. But once you earn that amount of money in a quarter, they credit you with that quarter. You earn 40 of them, they classify you as fully insured. You've just made the first hurdle to be able to get a Social Security disability benefit, and you cross the first hurdle to get a Social Security retirement check as well. Now, should a person become disabled and apply to Social Security for a benefit, Social Security is going to look back over the last 10 years of their life, 40 quarters, and they're going to make sure they've earned enough money in 20 of those 40 quarters. That refers them, that qualifies them as being what's called disability insured. So they must be not only fully insured, but they also must be disability insured. Now, most Americans can qualify. That's not very difficult. And as a matter of fact, they even adjust that number for age. We're going to get into that in a minute. There are some people who are just too young to have qualified who might need a disability benefit. But now it begins more difficult. The third bullet, what does it say? They have to be unable to perform any job that exists in a national economy. That's pretty tough. And the number may have changed, but the last time I looked, they would say if they think you could earn $500 to $1,000 a month, you're not getting your SSDI check. So that's a difficult hurdle. On top of that, the disability must be the type that's going to last at least a year or kill you. We're not talking about a broken arm here. We're talking about some severe disabilities. Now, should a person qualify, then they're not done. See, there's a 5-month waiting period. Social Security calls them up and says, oh, hey, dude, you're qualified. We're going to get you some money. You're going to get SSDI. And he says, great. Man, I'm starving to death. When am I going to get my check? Well, you got to wait 5 months to get your first check. You get your check in the 6th month. There's a 5-month waiting period. You get a check in the 6th month, and it's not retroactive. So they get their first check right here at 24 months, 24 months from here, then they can qualify for Medicare. Remember we said SSDI for 24 months? So here's where it starts. So how does somebody qualify to get an SSDI check, Social Security Disability Insurance check? Fully insured, disability insured, they ought to be basically unable to work. Disability must be really severe, 5-month waiting period, check in the 6th month, and it's not retroactive. Now, I told you it's adjusted for age. You probably have this chart in your slides. It should be somewhere around page 56 in your slides. I'm going to review it with you, because you may get a question about it. I want you to say we're going to stay focused on the chart. If you'll notice, the chart starts at age 32 and it ends at age 62. So if I were to ask you a question like this, John is 48. How many quarters of credits will he need to qualify to be fully insured? Excuse me, be fully insured. I think you could read that from the chart. It would be 26. Supposing they ask you, he's 47. How many credits will he need? Well, the answer would be 27. The chart is in 2-year increments, but we live 1 year at a time. Now, you are not going to have this chart in front of you on the test. You might get a question similar to what I just went over with you. So you got 2 choices. Memorize the chart or memorize the beginning. My suggestion is memorize the beginning. Memorize 31 to 42 equals 20. Just memorize it. When you go in to take the test, they're going to sit you down at a computer. They're going to give you some piece of plastic to write on and one of those grease marking pens. One of the first things I would do is I would write down on that piece of plastic, 31 to 42 equals 20. I'd write it down. Now, if I get this silly question somewhere through the test, I should be able to count on my fingers to get the right answer. If you don't write it down, you might be able to remember it, but you're taking a chance because you get a little bit brain weary, a little bleary-eyed. My suggestion is write it down right as soon as you can. And then if you don't see the question, big deal. But if you see the question, you're prepared for it. Another question, they may just give you the letters. What does PIA stand for? PIA is nothing more than your basic Social Security benefit. All right, primary insurance amount. So that's your basic Social Security benefit. Don't make it complicated. And I've already given you this, so we're not going to do this again. Other health concepts, other health insurance concepts. We've covered some of this. The owner has all the rights. One of those major rights is to do what? Name and change the beneficiary. Those traditional plans we talked about earlier have a death benefit as part of the contract. So the owner has the right to name and change the beneficiary. And they can make any other change without the consent of the beneficiary. And here's the point. Beneficiaries have no standing in these policies. Beneficiary has nothing to say about anything. The only time a beneficiary has anything to say is if they are the irrevocable beneficiary. But if they're just a regular plain vanilla beneficiary, they got nothing to say. So owners can do whatever they want. They don't need the beneficiary's permission. Remember we talked about revocable and irrevocable? Nothing new here. When we name beneficiaries, we name them in a pecking order. We have primary, any entity capable of receiving money. So let's touch on this. I don't think we did. Who or what can be a beneficiary? There's your answer. That eliminates dogs, trees, cats, and rocks. Okay? Your pet Fifi can't be the beneficiary because your pet Fifi can't cash the check. Minor kids can be beneficiaries. Not a bright idea, but you can. When you hear stories about people leaving stuff to their animals, what they really have done is left it to a trust, because a trust can be a legitimate beneficiary. And a trust is run by a human being called a trustee that was selected by the owner to run the deal so that the animals are cared for. So any entity capable of receiving money can be a beneficiary. No dogs, no trees, no cats, no rocks. Primary beneficiary, question comes up sometimes. This is really silly. How many primary beneficiaries can you have? As many as you want. The word primary means first. It does not mean only. If I want 10 primary beneficiaries, I can have them. Think of it like rows in a movie theater. I can have 10, 15, 20 primary beneficiaries. And if I don't tell the insurance company how to divide the money up when I die, it'll just divide the money up equally among the surviving beneficiaries, surviving primary beneficiaries. Now, in the event, on the contingency that there's no living, willing, or capable primary, then we would want to name some secondary beneficiary to take their place. So secondary or contingent beneficiaries become primary only if there's no living, willing, or capable primary. Modes of payment, we've already discussed this, like frequency, right? Weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. Nothing new here. We've already discussed this. Remember, they calculate their premium based upon receiving the premium on an annual basis. So if you want to pay more frequently, then it's going to cost you more by the end of the year. We've already discussed that one. Another approach on coordination of benefits. Let's assume we have a married couple. And daddy works for company A, they have group insurance, and mommy works for company B, they have group insurance, and they've decided that they're willing to pay whatever additional premium is necessary, and they're going to be dependent on their spouse's policies. So what would happen? If daddy becomes sick or hurt, his policy will be the primary payer, and then whatever this policy doesn't pay, his wife's policy would pay the balance within limits. And the same would be true if she got sick or hurt. So the coordination of benefits provision says the company you work for, that policy is primary, and then your spouse's policy will be the secondary payer. However, the question also comes up, what happens if baby is dependent on both policies? Which one will be primary? Well, Virginia uses the birthday rule, not what is commonly referred to as the gender rule. A birthday rule means this: whichever parent has their birthday first in the year will be primary. Whichever parent has the birthday that's earliest in the year is primary. I didn't say who's oldest or youngest. It got nothing to do with age. It's got to do with whichever birthday is first. That's the primary. Okay, that's the birthday rule. Virginia uses the birthday rule when it comes to children covered in the scenario I just gave you. We alluded to this a little earlier yesterday, an occupational policy versus a non-occupational policy. They could be identical coverages. I could buy a health insurance policy as a self-employed person with certain benefits. It's going to be called an occupational policy because I'm going to be covered around the clock, 24 hours a day, on and off the job, because I don't have workers' comp. If you work for a company and you buy the exact same policy I buy, that policy is going to be called non-occupational. because it's only going to cover you for off-the-job illnesses and injuries. Why? Because you have workers' comp to take care of those work-related illnesses and injuries. So be careful. Group insurance at work is non-occupational coverage. Anyone who's not self-employed, who has a health insurance policy and has a job, that policy is called non-occupational because it only covers them for non-occupational illnesses and injuries. Anyone who's self-employed, that policy is called occupational because they don't have workers' comp. We have been through the tax treatment. I'm not going to beat this to death. But remember, with medical insurance, the premiums are always tax deductible. The question becomes how much. Remember? And the one I don't have on this list is senior citizens is 7.5%. We covered that. Disability income insurance is depending upon who pays and who gets. When the payer and the recipient are different, then the payer gets a tax deduction. The recipient doesn't get a tax deduction, and the benefit's tax-free, and not benefits taxed. So I'm not going to go through this again because if I go through it again, it'll just confuse you. Just try to remember what I said. I do have an example, however. This may help you. Bring it around, full circle. John has a disability income policy. His employer pays 75% of the premium. He pays 25% of the premium. He becomes disabled. The benefit's $1,000 a month. How much of that benefit is taxable? I'm going to give you a second. Not expecting you to yell out an answer. Here's your answer. $750. How did I get $750? Because the employer paid 75% of the premium. And that means 75% of the benefit came from the employer's contribution. So that means 75% of the benefit is taxable. If the question said the employer paid 100% of the premium, the answer would be A. If the employee paid 100% of the premium, the answer would be D. You understand how it works. When the payer and the recipient are the same, no tax deduction, benefit tax-free. When the payer and the recipient are different, payer gets a tax deduction, recipient pays tax on the benefit. Now, there's another definition that shows up. How do we define total disability? Well, it's up to the insurance companies, actually. Insurance companies have two different definitions of total disability. One, depending, and different companies, one company will use one and another company will use another. The own occupation definition says, we'll pay you a benefit if you are unable to perform any of the duties of your own occupation based upon education, training, or experience. So let's assume we have a dentist. He's gone to college, he's gone to dental school, well-educated. He's a dentist. That's his occupation. He hurts his back. He can never be a dentist again. But he can find a job teaching at a university. If his policy has the own occupation definition, he's going to get a benefit from his policy because his own occupation was that of a dentist. On the other hand, if his policy had the any occupation definition, he's not going to get a benefit because the any occupation says we'll pay you a benefit if you're unable to perform any of the duties of any occupation based upon education, training, experience. So the any occupation definition is a more restrictive definition. Just like earlier yesterday we talked about means is meaner, well, any is more. Now, there's a difference in premium. The any occupation definition, all things being equal, that policy with the any occupation definition is going to have a lower premium because the company may not have as many claims they have to pay. There's always a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. Don't worry. Oh, partial disability. Forget partial disability. We should get rid of that. Residual disability. I don't know if we covered this. We talked about recurrent, but I'm not remembering residual. So I'll go over it again. It won't hurt you. Just like recurrent is not a kind of disability, but a method of providing a benefit, residual is the same. I think we did talk about this. John earns $5,000 a month, buys a policy with $3,000 a month benefit. He's totally disabled, which means he's lost 100% of his income. So the policy is going to pay 100% of its benefit. That's the residual clause. If he goes back to work part-time and earns $2,500, now he's only lost half his income. So the policy is going to pay half the benefit. So it's like a sliding scale. I do believe we covered this yesterday. But he's incentivized to go back to work, because now if he goes back to work, he's not cut off at the knees. He gets his income, he gets half his benefit, so he's got $4,000 coming in here where he only had $3,000 coming in here. So he's incentivized to go back to work. We did the recurrent, relapse, get those clear. So I'm not going to go over that one again. We've already done it. Managed care, not a big deal. We're not going to go through that. Workers' comp, we've already discussed that. I got some duplicates here, kids. I'm sorry about that. That's the transition I'm going through. So you're going to have to deal with it. We did the workers' comp. Remember I talked about the Walmart $25 wrist brace. I talked about that yesterday. We talked about subrogation as well. Nothing new there. So with that, we're done with this section. We're not done for the day, but we're done for this section. So we're going to take a break. I'm going to bring back, we're going to cover the law. We've got 2 sets of slides to cover under the law. And then we should be done. So take about 15 minutes, and you'll know I'm back because you'll hear me and see my screen, unless there are some questions after that. Okay, so statutes and regulations common to all lines. It should follow through on your PowerPoint, copy of your PowerPoint. The very next section should be after the pictures of the dollars and all that. It should be these slides. Okay. This is law. Now, most of what we've talked about over the past 2 days has been concept. I mean, there are some facts and things you got to know, but mostly concepts. If you get the concepts, you'll have a great chance of getting the right answer. That's why the value of the license coach is invaluable there. And this material, from now to the time we're done, is more like numbers, dollars, days, and dates, just facts you got to know. And by the way, the license coach is going to help you there too. So, but these are more factual, and I don't expect that you remember every fact I give you, but we need to alert you to the kinds of facts you need to be aware of, and alert to, so that you can sharpen your saw in those areas, so you know what kind of things they're going to be asking you. We know what kind of things they're going to ask you. We just don't know exactly how they're going to ask it. The outline, the outline that they give us, that I showed you a little earlier today, gives us exactly the topics they're going to cover and how many questions in each topic. So we know what the topics are. We just don't know how they're going to word the questions. So anyway, so here we go. First of all, the commissioner. In Virginia, the Bureau of Insurance is operated and run by a woman who happens to, I can't remember her name. I'm supposed to know her name, but I can't remember it. Anyway, she's the commissioner. The question you may get is, how does the commissioner get to be the commissioner? Well, there's your answer. She is appointed by what's referred to as a 3-judge panel made up of members of the State Corporation Commission. So she's not elected by the people. She's not appointed by the governor. She gets her job because she's appointed by this panel, okay? Their function. What is her function? Some of this should be just common sense, but we need to go through it. She has the duty to execute all the laws relative to insurance, make sure there are procedures available for everybody who wants a license to get licensed. That's both businesses and individuals. And issue rules and regulations. Now, the commissioner may issue any rule or regulation that she thinks is necessary. She doesn't need anybody's permission to issue a rule or regulation. She has hearings, but I'm not so sure she has to listen to anybody. She can do pretty much what she wants. But the point here is she issues rules and regulations. She doesn't enact, E-N-A-C-T. She doesn't enact the law. That, whoa, hold on a minute. You might want to drop that mic down, whatever you got going on in the background. Matter of fact, we'll just mute you. I just muted everybody. I don't know where that noise is coming from, but we're going to mute everybody. If you need to contact me, type in your panel in the chat, and I'll do my best to get back to you, okay? Anyway, let's go back. So she executes the law. She licenses all the people and organizations that want a license. She makes sure there's a procedure there for that. And she does that by issuing rules and regulations. And she can issue any rule or regulation that she thinks is necessary. She doesn't enact laws, E-N-A-C-T. She doesn't enact law. That's the legislature's job, okay? But her job is to execute or enforce the law. That's her job. Now, part of her job is that she has to make sure that we keep records. So you and I are required to keep records. What kind of records do you have to keep? Anything relative to your transaction with a client. Copies of applications, correspondence, emails. You got to keep those. Angie, and I'm getting a lot of background noise from your microphone, so I've just muted you again. Okay? So unless you can figure out what that background noise is, talk to me through the chat, okay? Because it gets real. All that, whatever that noise is like I can't even think over it. All right. So you and I are required to keep records. Question is how long? 3 years. We're required to keep records for 3 years. They can be digital. They can be paper copies. That's not the important thing. But you're required to keep records. Insurance companies also have to keep records for 3 years. Now, complaint records, insurance companies have to keep complaint records. You and I don't, but insurance companies have to. Now, if you get a phone call from somebody who's screaming at you over the phone, that's not somebody who's complaining. That's just somebody who's venting. But if you get something in writing that is a complaint, you and I do not have the authority to deal with that. We don't have the authority. We're an agent of the company. We represent them, but we don't have the authority to deal with complaints. We have to pass it up to chain of command, and if then they have to make a file, a record of it, and they may get a hold of us to tell us how they want us to handle it, but we can only interact on a complaint situation at the request and direction of the insurance company. We can't take our own on our own initiative to do it. But so insurance companies have to keep complaint records for 5 years. Long-term care partnership ads. Let's talk about this. Long-term care, there's a couple of areas I need to discuss here. Long-term care insurance, we talked about that yesterday, how it's designed to provide dollars when somebody can no longer, without assistance, perform 2 or more activities of daily living. And today we also talked about the fact that those people who are on Medicaid have their long-term care needs taken care of by Medicaid. They have to go to a nursing home, but Medicaid pays for it. Here's the problem. To qualify for Medicaid, you basically got to be broke. You can't have any assets. Now, people who have money, I have no problem with people who have money, I promise you that. People who have money have the ability to hire legal counsel and to arrange their affairs in such a way that they have no assets or very few assets. So that if the need arises for them to get care, they can go on Medicaid and we'll pay for it. Well, that kind of upsets me personally. I'm not a big fan of somebody who's got a ton of money making me pay for their long-term care needs. That's not my idea of a nice person. So the state has come up with a plan to solve that problem. And also, this is another fact. 69% of every Medicaid dollar, that's 69 cents of every Medicaid dollar that's being spent, is being spent to care for a senior citizen in a nursing home. That's a significant portion of that budget. So when people abuse the system, in my mind, that is abusing the system. What they're doing is legal, but it is, in my opinion, an abuse. So when people abuse the system and are there, and when they don't need to be there, spend your own assets down before you want me to start paying your way. That's not cool. So the state has come up with a solution, and I'm going to paraphrase it. They say, okay, rich guy, we know what you're doing. It's legal. We don't like it. But we have a better idea. Rather than you spending thousands and tens of thousands of dollars with attorneys to hide your assets so that you can get on Medicaid when you need to go to long-term care, if you will buy a long-term care policy from one of the partner companies that we work with, this is a major corporation. This is not like Lou Crusati's long-term care company. He's like the Genworth of the world, and Mutual of Omaha, and a few other big companies, John Hancock. If you buy a policy of long-term care insurance from them that is specifically designed, we're going to call it a partnership plan, we will allow you, and follow me now, we will allow you to keep $1 worth of assets for every $1 worth of benefit you get from your long-term care policy. So you won't have to spend the assets down, and you can keep your assets. So think about this. If somebody, let's say, has got $1 million worth of assets, and they don't want to have to spend them down, they could spend thousands of dollars with an attorney, or they could buy a partnership long-term care policy with a benefit that would pay out over time $1 million. So much a month, over so many months, would equal at some point $1 million. Think of it like a pool of money. So if they need long-term care, if they're unable to perform 2 or more of the activities of daily living, then they go to the insurance policy they purchased, and that policy will pay them to help them take care of those long-term care needs. But when that policy runs out of money, they will be able to set aside that $1 million worth of assets from the spend down provisions, which is what they call them, to qualify for Medicaid. See, what happens if you've got a lot of money, you got to spend your assets first, and when you spent them, then you're broke, and then you go on Medicaid. That's called a spend down. So that delays, at the very least, will delay that person's access into Medicaid, which is a good thing for you and I as citizens. We're not paying for them, and they still got all those assets they should have spent. And in many cases, they die before they even get to the point that they've exhausted their policy, which is they never get on Medicaid. So there's some real benefit to society to have this partnership program, okay? So these partnership plans have a few requirements. They must provide inflation protection. Meaning, Protection. If I could hit the right keys, I know how to spell it, but I can't get the right keys. Protection. Inflation protection. And it has to be a minimum of 3%. You may need that number. So here's what would happen. let's assume, I'll use round numbers, it'll make it easier. Somebody buys a long-term care policy from a partnership company, and the premium, let's assume that their benefit is $100 a month. That means next year, that benefit has to go to $103 a month. And the year after, it has to go to 103% more of 103. I can't do the math in my head. So that's compound inflation protection. So they have to do that. That provides that benefit will last longer than if they just kept it at $100 a month, because those costs go up over time. So whenever an insurance company wants to sell a partnership plan, when they want to advertise those plans, they run ads. There's a question on the test about that. So any long-term care partnership ad must be kept by the insurance company for 4 years. Any ad advertising long-term care partnership plans must be kept for 4 years. Then those of us who sell that stuff have to take special courses specifically pertaining to partnership programs. And those training records must be kept by the insurance company for 5 years. So now there's a lot of numbers on the page, but if you look at them carefully, there's only 3 different numbers, 3, 4, or 5. So any question you get about keeping a record, how long, it's either going to be 3, 4, or 5 years. So here's the way I rearrange it. All records have to be kept for 3 years, except for long-term care partnership ads, which have to be kept for 4, and any training or complaint records have to be kept for 5. If you can organize it that way in your head, you shouldn't have any trouble answering questions about how long records have to be kept. Okay. Now, because records have to be kept, the commissioner is required, that's what that word shall means, is required to inspect the books and records of every admitted insurance company once every 5 years. That could show up on your test. The commissioner shall inspect the books and records of every admitted insurance company once every 5 years. She may inspect any record anytime. 2 different questions, 2 different answers. What shall she do and what may she do? Okay. Now, when it says any record anytime, that doesn't mean 4 o'clock in the morning at McDonald's. But if she walks into our office or your office or my office or one of her staff, it doesn't have to be her personally, and says, I want to see your books and records, we can't say I'm busy, come back tomorrow. Any record, anytime. We have to open the files and let her see those records. That's the way it works. Penalties. As agents, as licensed producers in Virginia and agents of insurance companies, we're accountable for our actions. We're not politicians. We don't get away with stuff, okay? We just can't apologize to the world because we did something stupid and expect to ride off into the sunset. We're held accountable. We'll be penalized. You need to know these penalties. If we intentionally violate any rule, regulation, order, law relative to insurance, we could be fined $5,000 per violation. If we do that unintentionally, it drops to $1,000 per violation with a cap of 10. Now, one question you may get is, what is the maximum penalty you can be fined per violation? The answer is 5, not 10, because a 10 is accumulation of a series. So the maximum penalty per violation is 5. Unintentional, yeah. Ignorance is not an excuse for us. Now, I wouldn't be overly concerned about this. Don't panic. I've been in this business for over 50 years. I don't know anyone personally who's ever paid a fine or a penalty because they had they did something wrong in the insurance business. There are some that have, but these are the kinds of people that like to play in traffic. They just like to be in trouble. It's very difficult to get in trouble. Use some common sense, follow the golden rule, treat people like you want to be treated, stay abreast, do your continuing education, which we're going to talk about, and you'll be fine. So what happens in my live classes, sometimes people get a little, I see them pale. Oh my God. Well, not an issue. Follow the golden rule is not an issue. But you need to know the numbers. Now, you have to be licensed to sell insurance. That's why you're going through this mess. So anyone who attempts to sell insurance without a license, the penalty is going to be an amount of money equal to the first year commission. I don't know how they calculate it, but that's the answer to the question. What is the penalty for someone trying to sell insurance without a license? It's an amount of money equal to the first year commission for the sale of that product. If the commissioner suspects that anybody, licensed agent, is violating any law or rule or regulation, she can and will issue a cease and desist order. Stop, don't do it again. I know you know what it means, right? Stop, don't do it again. Now, she's got to give us 10 days notice to knock it off. That 10 days gives us time to ask for a hearing if we want. We have a right to have a hearing to make our case. So you may get a question about the cease and desist order. Does she have to give us a hearing? Yeah. How much notice? 10 days. Okay. Now, once we get a cease and desist order, do we have to stop all insurance activity? Answer, no. Just knock off the stuff she tells us to stop doing. Okay, you're not totally out of business. Just knock off the bad thing. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. You don't have to answer it vocally. Just think about it. Would you consider this to be an intentional or an unintentional violation? If some agent says, heck with you, Commissioner, I'm going to do what I want anyway. Well, you know, that's intentional, isn't it? So the penalty is going to be $5,000 and or loss of license and or 6 months. That's not 6 months in Tahiti. The commissioner does have the authority to put us in jail. Once again, I have never seen it happen to anyone that I've ever worked with. I'm sure it has to some. But it's a civil penalty. Please make note, it's a civil penalty, never criminal. If the commissioner suspects criminal activity of an agent, she has to refer that to the state attorney general. That's the attorney general's job to deal with criminal stuff. So, yes, she can put us in jail, but that's going to be a civil penalty, never criminal. The license you're going to get, we call it an agent license, but technically it's referred to as an insurance producer license. It's a Virginia resident insurance producer license. Virginia resident insurance producer license. That allows you to become an agent. See, you take that producer license back to the company you're working with, and then they will appoint you to become their agent. Think about you, we produce premium to insurance companies. So that allows us to do what? Sell, solicit, negotiate contracts of insurance. Not a big deal. We can also what? Receive or share commissions. Now, I have that share in red. You may get a question about sharing commissions. With whom can you share commissions? Answer, anyone who has a license similar to yours. Anyone who has a license similar to yours. So I happen to have a life annuity and health license. You will have a health license. If I call you up and say, I know somebody who wants to get some insurance that you market and sell, and I'd like you to go see them. And you say, great, give me their name and number. I say, yeah, wait a minute, don't go so fast. I'll give you their name and number, but we're going to enter into an agreement where I'm going to get 10% of your commission when you make the sale. Now, you don't have to agree to do that if you don't want to. It's up to you. But then again, I don't have to give you the name and number either. I'll find somebody else who's willing to do it. I'll share commissions with anybody. That's found money. See, I'm not appointed by the company you work for. I don't represent them, so they won't ever pay me directly. But I have a license similar to yours. That's my point here. If you have a friend in another state that has a health insurance license with that state, that is not a license similar to yours. They must be licensed in the state that you're licensed with a license like yours. Similar license. So yeah, you can share commissions. It's a good thing. Reciprocity is great. Now, the license you're going to get is that as a Virginia resident. How do you know you're a Virginia resident? Well, If your principal residence is here in Virginia, you're a Virginia resident. Or if you declare Virginia residency on your federal income tax return. A lot of military personnel whose primary residence is another state, while they're here, they file tax returns and they use the address from here. That would qualify them to get a Virginia resident license. Or if they pay Virginia income tax, some of their spouses, some of them get part-time jobs. Or if your principal place of business is in Virginia. Now, let me tell you what this is not. This is not for the agent in California who wants an open office in Virginia. No, 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 no. This is for what I call the border cities. You may be aware of the city like Bristol. Bristol, Virginia is really bordering two states. It's Bristol, Tennessee and Bristol, Virginia, same town. I could literally live in Bristol, Tennessee and have an office across the street and I'd be in Bristol, Virginia. So that's what this is about. There are other ways, but these are the ones that seem to show up on the test. So now you're going to end up with a Virginia resident license. You can get a non-resident license in any other state once you get your Virginia resident license by just applying online, pay them a fee, and poof, you got a license, no test. So the license you're going to get has no expiration date. It's perpetual. Perpetual. No expiration date. It'll have an issue date, but no expiration date. So in the pure sense, it doesn't renew, not like your driver's license. You look at your driver's license, there's a specific date by which you must renew it. Well, that's different in our license. Now, it ends up being the same thing. It's just the semantics they use, so don't fall into a trap. The license doesn't renew. We have to maintain it. We have to keep it active if we expect to be able to earn money with it. And how do we keep it active? We have to do certain continuing education courses every 2 years. We have to pay a continuance fee to the state. You'll notice they don't even call it a renewal fee. They call it a continuance fee. So the license does not renew, must be maintained. We maintain it by doing the appropriate continuing education courses every 2 years and paying a continuance fee. By the way, that happens to be $20 at this point. So you guys, the way the system is set up, you'll be licensed in 2017, which means by the end of 2018, you're going to have to get these CEs done. We'll talk about that later. What are the qualifications to get a license? Got to be at least 18. Got to be a resident. Have to pass a test. Remember, 70% or better score. You have to make written application within 183 days of passing the test. 183 days is exactly the same as 6 months. They may interchange 6 months or 183 days, or they may use 180 days. Doesn't matter. Now, nobody waits that long, okay? But you could, if you go beyond the period of time that they say you must have it applied for, then you have to take the test over. You've already paid your fees. It's $15 per license. You also have to be a person of good character. Good character. That means you have to pass a background check. That's already been applied for. You're getting that done. Okay? So you need to know these little factoids. How do you qualify to get a license? I haven't met any of you, but I'm going to assume all of you are at least 18. Now, there's another license that exists in Virginia. It's referred to as an insurance consultant license. It's a separate license and a separate test. And a consultant is a person, as you can imagine, who gets paid to give advice. That's not your license. Your license is a producer license. This license is a consultant license. However, there's a however here. If someone has a life, annuity, or a health license and wants to act as a consultant and get paid for the advice, they can do that. So you can choose to be either a producer who's an agent of an insurance company or a consultant who's going to get paid to give advice about health insurance. You can't do both. You don't have to take a separate test because your license, actually, the test they take is the exact same test you take, but they're not going to be designated as a producer. They're going to be designated as a consultant. Now, I'm going to tell you something, kids. I've been in this business over 50 years, and I don't know anyone ever who acts as a consultant. There isn't any money in consulting, okay? But you need to be aware of this. Consultants get paid to give advice, separate license, separate test. But if a person's got a life annuity health license, they may act as a consultant without having to take that test. But you can't do both. It's either one or the other. Now, another question, can a business get a license? The answer is yes. But the business can't take a test. So if I want to set up an agency, let's say, and I want to call it You Bring 'em, I Rip 'em Insurance Agency, or Dewey Cheatham and Howe Insurance Agency. If I wanted to do that, I could do that. But any name I use other than my own name is going to be referred to as a fictitious business name. And I must get that fictitious business name approved and registered with the Commonwealth. And then once I get that fictitious business name approved and registered with the Commonwealth, they will issue that business a license, which is the exact same license I have. So they can be licensed. My business can be licensed. It can have the same license I have. Now, if you operate under your own name, that's referred to as your bona fide natural name, you don't have to register it with the state. It's your own name. Why do people do this? I don't know. Some people like to have their commissions paid. See, if you want your commission paid to your business, you have to have it licensed, because insurance companies can only pay commissions to properly licensed entities. And if your business isn't licensed, it's a fictitious business name and it isn't licensed, then the insurance company is not going to pay the commission there. They're going to pay it to you. Some people prefer it the other way. I don't care. I've been doing this for a really long time, and I get been paid under my name for the last 55 years or so. Works out just fine. But you need to know those little facts. There are circumstances where the state will allow someone to get a temporary license. A temporary license. Only one temporary per person per lifetime. And it's only good for 6 months. 183 days, 180 days, pick your answer. They don't want someone to constantly renew temporary licenses and never sit for the test. Because getting a temporary license, you don't have to take a test. But it's only temporary. What would be a circumstance that someone could get a temporary license? Well, if an insurance agent dies, becomes disabled, or is deployed, their spouse, next of kin, personal representative may immediately apply and receive a license temporarily so that that business can continue. But it's only good for 6 months. The idea would be if they're dead or disabled, it gives them time to find a buyer for that business. Whatever. Or get their own license. There's a fourth possibility. It's referred to as a debit agent. It's referred to as a debit agent. These are not as common as they used to be, but they're still around. These are people that go door to door collecting premiums from policies that have already been sold. They're small policies. They usually refer to them as burial policies. $1,000, $2,000 a month, $2,000 in death benefit, maybe $5,000 in death benefit. Not very much death benefit. And they walk around door to door, usually monthly, collecting, $2 a week, $2 a month, $3 a month, whatever it is. A debit agent has a route. It's like a bread route. Now, I'm not being derogatory here, but just to give you an idea how it works. They get this big old book, and in that book is all these ledger cards, and they call around door to door and collect money. That's a debit agent. They also can get a temporary license that will allow them to go around and collect the money door to door. Ultimately, they're going to have to get a permanent license if they want to sell insurance. Now, you may get a question that has to do with something like this. Which of the following do not need an insurance license? And they list off 4 choices. Well, here's a rule of thumb. I can't give you the entire answer because it covers 2 pages in a book, okay? And you may have some of that in the textbook. You can look them up. But it's very simple if you just follow what I'm saying up here. There are people in our business who don't need a license because they don't help others make decisions about what to buy and then earn a commission as a result of that. That's the job of an agent or a producer. So customer service personnel on an 800 number from the home office, they don't need a license. The officer of the company, the different levels of management, they don't always need a license. So if they're not interacting with the customer, helping them make decisions about what to buy and earn a commission from it, they don't need a license. If you can hang on to that fact, you get a question about which of the following does not need a license, you should be able to figure it out. Okay, continuing education. So you are going to be required, as all insurance producers in Virginia are required, to do continuing education courses every 2 years. And we refer to that as a biennium. We must have these courses completed by midnight, 11:30 of the even-numbered biennium. They give you a grace period. Make a note. They give you a grace period till December 31st. But if you don't get it done by December 31st, you're going to lose your license. So the question is now, how many hours do you need? If you have 1 license, you need to complete 16 hours of continuing education. That addresses the specialty your license is. You get a health license, you're going to have to take courses in health. And then the other 8 hours can be broken down this way. Not can be, but will be. You can pick 5 hours in any other topic you want, as long as it's an approved course. And then 3 hours, this could be your test question, 3 hours in Virginia law and regulations. So every 2 years, you're going to need to do 16 hours of continuing education. 13 hours is most likely going to be in your specialty. Because why would you want to take a course on auto insurance, okay, or homeowners? Take it on stuff you do. And then 3 hours, Virginia law and regulation. Somebody has 2 or more licenses, doesn't double. They just have to pick up an extra 8 hours. We're going to have a test question to show you how that works in a minute. Now, Virginia is the only state I know where 1 and 1 is 1. I tease my wife about this all the time. 1 and 1 is 1. Because life annuity is 1 license, health is another license, because you guys are getting the health license. I have another group that I teach, they just get the life and annuity license. Those are 2 separate licenses. You can't sell life and annuities, and they can't sell health insurance. However, if somebody has a life annuity and health, that's still only 1 license. You would think that would be 2, huh? Let's read what it says underneath the red. It says any agent who holds life and annuity license or a health agent license or both shall complete 16 hours. So 1 and 1 is 1, which gives you the chance. I'm going to kind of throw this back at you a minute. So you have a health license. That's what you're going to have. How many hours do you have to need completed? You should be answering 16. The 8 hours, actually 13 hours, can be any combination of life, annuity, or health. The state doesn't care. Now, you'll probably want to focus more on the health stuff, but You can do anything with respect to life, annuity, and health because they combine it all as one license. 3 hours has to be in law and regulation. Now, let me go over something here. You can take these courses a number of ways. You can do a home study course. You can take an online course. But if you do that, you have to take some kind of closed book exam and pass with a 70% score. Or, and sometimes they require a proctored closed book exam, 70% score. Or you can go to a live class. If you go to a live class, no test. Costs a little bit more, but some people prefer not having to worry about taking a test. It's your call. You can do whatever you want. Now, I'm going to make a blatant advertisement for business here. American Academy for Insurance Training is an approved continuing education provider for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Ruth Young, who you either have met or will meet, and I know each other for a very long time. We've had a great business relationship for a long time. And she allows me to come into her region, her area, and we set up shop in one of the offices somewhere around September or October of the even-numbered year on a weekend, and we knock out the 16 hours in a live class. The price is usually pretty decent. I charge somewhere around $89. If you do a live class, it might cost you $35. There's a difference in cost. That's your call. We get it done over a weekend and you go home. You're not required to participate. Disclaimer, I want to make sure nobody misunderstands here. You're not required to come to my class. But if I didn't bring it up, I'd be an idiot. Okay. Now, there'll be notices given out. If Ruth allows me to come back this year, I don't know. She has a right to say, don't come back this year. It's her little red wagon. But I'd also be an idiot for not bringing it up. But anyway, you're going to have it done by November of 18 because you'll be licensed for the full biennium. Here's the way they calculate it, and they may have a question about this. Anyone licensed for the full biennium must take the 16 hours. So anyone licensed as late as anyone licensed as late as 12/31 of the odd-numbered year is considered licensed for the full biennium. That'll be you guys. Anyone licensed as of January 1st of the even year is pushed forward to the next biennium. Not pushed, pushed. And you may get a question about this. You may get a question about that. So what is considered to be licensed for the full biennium? Anyone licensed at any time during the odd-numbered year up through and including 12/31. Remember, your license is going to have an issue date. Whatever that issue date is, it is. You're considered licensed for the full biennium. You're going to have to do your CEs by the end of the even-numbered year that's coming up. As of 1/1 of the even year, push forward to the next biennium. Okay? So let's talk about the possibilities. John has a life and annuity license. His wife has a health license. How many hours of CE credits do they need? Not expecting you to yell out an answer, but I'm going to give you the answer. If you guess 16, try again. The answer is 32. Because many people guess 16 because what they miss is they. See, it says he has, she has, they need. And he and she comes to 32. I hope you see that. It's just the kind of stuff they do to try to confuse you on the test. They got a step further. He has a life and annuity license. His wife has property, casualty, and health. How many hours of CE credits do they need? Well, now the answer becomes 40, because he needs 16. That's one license. She needs 24 because she has 2, property, casualty, and health. Now that's 40. I hope that makes sense to you. No more than 75% of your courses can come from company or agency-sponsored courses. You may get a call from management or an email saying, hey, we're going to have a meeting, and if you come to that meeting, we're going to give you 2 hours or 3 hours of CE credits. That's okay. That's cool. But no more than 75% of the required hours can come from that environment. They want at least 25% to come from some unaffiliated, outside approved provider, like American Academy for Insurance Training. Now, there's a ton of providers out there. You don't have to come to us. You go to anybody you want, do it any way you like. Just get it done. No matter what, get it done. I'm going to give you guys a hint here. You know, things don't always go the way we plan. I don't know what your experience in life has been, but things don't always go the way you plan it. But once you get this license, considering the pain in the butt it is to get it, why would you ever let it go? No matter what happens, because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring after tomorrow. So if something occurs and you don't continue active in the business, that doesn't mean you should give up the license. So keep the license. What is it going to cost you every couple of years? $20 and maybe another $80 just to maintain a license that can be so valuable you can make a fortune with, rather than go back and start over. Now, I can't force you to do it, obviously, but I just give you some food for thought. You don't have to do anything to maintain this license other than keep your nose clean, don't get convicted of a felony, and do the CEs every 2 years and pay your continuance fee. And you're done. Moving on. Again, must be completed by 11:30. Remember, they give you a grace period till 12:31, so read the question carefully when they ask you, when do you have to have it done? But if you don't get it done by 12:31, kiss your license goodbye. It's terminated. And the only way to get it back is take the test over. There is no excuse, none, for this ever to occur for somebody who doesn't want it to occur. Because every year, the state sends out a letter to every licensee who's required to do their CEs by the end of that biennium. And the letter starts out very sweetly. It says, you failed to comply with the requirements to maintain your license for continuing education. Failure to comply will result in termination of license and burn down your house and take your children and shoot you in the eye and rip your lips off. All right? Scare you, scare you, scare you. They send the letter out at least twice. So there's no excuse not to get your CEs done if you want to get them done. I got a call this last year from somebody. They called me back in January. They got a letter of termination from the state. What can I do? I said, take the test over, brother. I can't help you. I never let somebody else's lack of planning become my emergency. Something my dad taught me. Never let somebody else's lack of planning become your emergency. Do you ever find that people who want to do that, they don't plan and then you got to rush? I'm not so sure that's a good way to live a life. Okay, moving on. So some people get waivers. Watch for the question about waivers. If you're really, really sick, they'll give you a waiver. If you're overseas in the military, they'll give you a waiver. There are other reasons, but those are the two that show up on the test. Now, once you get better, you got to catch up. You're not excluded or exempt. You have to catch up. Or when you come back stateside, you have to catch up. Some people are exempt. Anyone licensed during the last 12 months of the biennium is exempt. I just went over that with you, didn't I? You are not exempt from this biennium. And consultants who also find out they want to be licensed as an agent, now they don't have to do 2 sets of CEs. They only have to do 1 set. This is the one that seems to show up a lot. Anybody who's 65 or older by the end of the biennium have to have a license for at least the last 20, that should say consecutive, 20 consecutive years. With 4 in Virginia, may apply for an exemption. And of course, non-resident agents who satisfied your resident state requirements. Again, there's a lot of reciprocity among states. I'm non-resident licensed in about 8 states. If I had to do CEs for every state I'm licensed in, I'd be doing those CEs 24/7, 365. So as long as I complete my home state requirement, that satisfies the requirement for any non-resident state I'm licensed in. So that's the way it works. On your license, when you send in the application to get your license, actually it's done now online, there's a place for three addresses: home address, office address, mailing address. They can all be the same, they can all be different. If you change any of those 3, you got to notify the commissioner within 30 days of the change in writing. There's a form you fill out online to do that. Now watch for this one. If you move out of Virginia, your license is terminated. It's called administrative termination, even if you don't tell the commissioner. I didn't say you went away on vacation. I say you moved. If you move from Virginia, the minute you cross the line into another state, your license is terminated. Now, here's what you do if you're going to move. Plan it. We generally don't wake up on Tuesday morning and say, okay, kids, we're moving to Arkansas. It's a planned event, so you plan it. You contact the state you're moving to. You get a non-resident license in that state. It's very easy. You go online, you fill out a form, you pay them a fee, poof, you got the license. Non-resident. You drive across the border to move to your new state. Your Virginia license is terminated, but you still have your non-resident license in the new state. So you show up, you tell them you're now a resident. They will switch it for you, maybe for a fee, most likely not. And then if you want, you can contact Virginia and you say, I now have a resident license in Arkansas or wherever. I'd like to get a Virginia non-resident license, and you can do that. So it's an easy switch. You get it? You just flip-flop it. But the test question is about what happens to your license if you move out of Virginia. Answer, terminated. Now, suspension, revocation, and denial. Your license can be suspended, revoked, or denied for a lot of reasons. Most of them obvious. You get caught cheating on a test. They're not going to give you your license. You get caught forging a name to a document. You're going to lose your license. Those questions should not be hard for you to figure out. But here's the one that messes a lot of people up. There's a big difference between being indicted for a felony and being convicted of a felony. You don't lose your license if you've been indicted, but you will lose your license if you're convicted. So you must make sure you read the questions so you understand what are they asking me. They talk about indictment or conviction. Indictment, nothing happens. Convicted, kiss your license goodbye. Now you might be able to get it back, but you're going to have to wait 5 years. If your license is denied or revoked for any of the reasons that they could deny or revoke, which includes convicted of a felony, you got to wait at least 5 years to get it back. You got to be licensed at the time you make your sale to earn a commission. That should not be tough to figure out. But in your end of the business, which you guys, one of the benefits you have, the compensation package is awesome because you're going to get renewal commissions. For as long as that business stays on the books, you're going to get a check. So that work you did yesterday and got paid for, you're going to get paid for tomorrow and the next day and the next day. It's pretty awesome. Okay. So you don't have to be licensed as far as the state is concerned. You don't have to be licensed to get renewal commissions. You only have to be licensed to get your initial sale commission. And as I mentioned to you earlier, when we were talking about business licenses, the company can only pay, your insurance company can only pay commissions to properly licensed agents. Now, administrative fees. There may be a test question about administrative fees. What's an administrative fee? Well, let me give you an example. Let's assume you're sitting in your office and somebody comes in and says, I want to buy some insurance. You say, great, I charge $20 to fill out the application. That's an administrative fee. Well, you can't just charge them $20 because you want them to buy your lunch that day. You have to have a schedule of these fees already calculated and posted up on the wall so the customer can see it. It has to be there for public view. And then you have to get them to sign a copy of that fee schedule, and you have to keep that copy for guess how long? 3 years. Nowhere in my paragraph, in my bullet, does it say you have to give them a copy, because you don't. Now, would I give them a copy? Of course I would. But that's what the problem on the questions on the test is, that we read into the question. Don't read into the question. They're asking you what must be done. And what must be done is you have to have a schedule of fees posted, and the client has to sign a copy of it, and you got to keep it for 3 years. You're not required to give them a copy. You might want to, and I would, but you don't have to. If you get convicted of a felony after you have your license, you have to notify the commissioner within 30 days. I didn't say indicted, right? I said convicted. You got to notify the commissioner within 30 days, and then he's going to take your license, or she. Certain marketing practices are illegal. You got to be careful. Rebating is illegal. Rebating is offering somebody anything of value to induce them to do business with you. Now, that doesn't mean you can't give them trinkets like magnets for their refrigerator, or keychain, or a calendar. That's different. Nominal stuff under $25 is not a deal, not a problem. But if you give them a gift certificate to go to dinner, that could be rebating. If you give them tickets to go to a ball game, that could be rebating, especially if the ticket's over $25. And I don't know too many sporting events, especially professional events, you can get for less than $25. Can't do it. So, how do you get around it? Go with them. Don't send them, go with them. Have fun. Misrepresentation. No kidding. If we lie, we could lose our license, okay? If we make misleading and statements, either written or oral, we could lose our license, or at least be fined. Defamation. I used to work for a man. He was from Marion, South Carolina. He was worth $150 million when I met him. He had a hair lip, couldn't talk very well, but he made a ton of money selling sewing machines door to door. Amazing guy. He had these sayings he used to, and they used to stick in my head. They still do. One of them sticks in my head right now. He says, whenever you throw dirt, some of it gets on you. He said that all the time. So that's defamation. Not a good idea. First of all, you could be in trouble. You could lose your license or get fined. So you never want to talk trash about another entity or person in the business. And besides, it's not good business. Whenever you throw dirt, some of it gets on you. Be real careful. I know you know that false advertising is illegal, but here's where they zero in on the test. When we misrepresent the name of a policy to be something that it's not. Now, normally you're not going to have this problem, because you're going to use the name that the company gives on the name of the policy. You don't make something up. So you can't say this is a charter policy, because a charter policy would imply that the person who buys it is something special, because a charter member of an organization is a unique and elite group. Only a few people can be the charter member of anything. That's not true here. In insurance, they'll sell that policy to anybody who can afford it, want it, and qualify. So you can't do that. And life insurance agents fall into this trap a lot. They call their policies investments, and they're not investments. They're life insurance policies. Boycott, coercion, and intimidation. I know you would imagine, I'm imagining you know that boycott is not cool. Intimidating people to buy, not cool. That would be not cool. But coercion. Earlier yesterday, I said, might have been the day before. No, yesterday. We were only together yesterday. A bank can require, as a condition of a loan, that you have insurance. That's not coercion. Coercion occurs when they make you buy it from a specific agent or company. That's coercion. That's illegal. Discrimination. I have the word unfair discrimination. You know, that word has gotten a bad rap, because when people think of discrimination, they're always thinking about either racial or religious discrimination, and it's more than that, isn't it? I mean, you should be discriminating every day about who you hang out with. And the food we put in, I mean, I'm supposed to watch what I put in my mouth. Food, I'm not very discriminating with the food I eat. But my point is, in our world, in the world of insurance, we can discriminate against people in certain areas, where in the real world you cannot. Here's an example. In the real world, we may never discriminate against anyone based upon their age. Not allowed. It's called ageism. You can't do it. We do it in insurance all the time. Old people pay more for the same thing that a young person would want. Young people pay less. Gender. Can't discriminate in the real world based on gender, but in insurance, they do all the time. Men pay more for life insurance than women, all other things being equal. It's the way it works. So I've created this little list. It's called an unfair discrimination list. Insurance companies may never, ever discriminate against anyone based upon this taboo list: race, religion, color, creed, national origin, sexual preference, and domestic violence. Insurance companies may never, ever discriminate against anybody. They can't charge an Italian more money for his insurance than they can a Frenchman, even if they could prove the Italian doesn't live as long. Okay? Can't do that. Domestic violence is a new addition. Relatively new anyway. In years past, when I was younger, insurance companies did not want to insure women, especially who were involved in a relationship where there was violence. Why, you ask? Because they got hurt a lot. And that means that they were in a hospital and doctor bills that the insurance company had to pay for. And sometimes they died. But that law has been changed, and they can no longer discriminate against any scenario where there might be domestic violence. Now, what do you not see up there? You don't know what you don't see. Well, I'm going to tell you what you don't see. You don't see marital status. You don't see marital status. Why? Because insurance companies may discriminate against someone based upon their marital status. They don't very often, but they can. This is especially prevalent in auto insurance. Young men under the age of 25 who are single will most likely pay more for their auto insurance than if they were married. It's just the way it works. So this is the taboo list. Insurance companies may never, ever discriminate against anybody based upon those items. If you have any questions, make sure you contact me offline. Twisting. Twisting is illegal. When I was a young man, there was a dance called a twist. My parents used to think that was illegal. If my mom and dad saw what goes on a dance floor today, they'd be spinning in their graves. If they thought twisting was illegal, they would be getting these kids rooms, telling them to get the hell off the dance floor and get a room. So anyway, we're not talking about dancing here. Twisting is the act of lying to someone to induce them to lapse, cancel, surrender, and switch a policy. Because if we have to lie to them to get them to do it, it's probably not in their best interest. Read the question carefully. It is not illegal to induce someone to lapse, cancel, surrender a policy, because it might be in their best interest. So as long as you make all disclosures and make sure the customer understands the negative and positive aspects and results of that switch, they make the decision that's best for them. I've found in my career that when people get good information, they generally make good decisions. When they get half-baked information, they make half-baked decisions. So remember, it's not twisting if we induce someone to lapse, cancel, surrender. It's twisting if we misrepresent to do that. So keep that in mind. It's illegal. Now, there's an organization out there called the Virginia Insurance Guarantee Association. And if you and I were to form an organization that does what this does and use the word guarantee, they'd put us in jail for fraud, because it doesn't guarantee anything. Doesn't guarantee anything. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. But it's a state thing, so the state can call it what it wants. It can call it mashed potatoes if it wants. It doesn't matter. It's also referred to as the Life Accident and Sickness Guarantee Association. You need to know why this association exists. It exists to protect the public when an insurance company becomes insolvent, where they can't pay their claims. Now, if an insurance company can't pay its claims, this is the only recourse the public has to get some money, is through this association. Now, I've been in the business more than 50 years, and over my 50 years, I can count on one hand and have more than 9 fingers left over the number of insurance companies that have gone bankrupt. That's what happens when they go bankrupt. They can't pay their claims. Matter of fact, they call it bankrupt. You never hear it called insurance-rupt. Because insurance companies don't go bankrupt. They're regulated at the state level. And the closer the regulator is to the who's being regulated, the more impact there is, the more regulation, the more control they have. So insurance companies, by and large, don't go bankrupt. So you don't have to worry about this, but you need to be aware of it for the test. Its purpose is to protect the public if an insurance company becomes insolvent. It becomes a safety net. That's the problem. It's not a guarantee. It's a safety net. So here's a typical question you may get. Mary has 10 life insurance policies on her husband. I know we're not doing life insurance, but I want to make the point. Mary has 10 life insurance policies on her husband, and he dies. What is the most she could get from the Guarantee Association? That answer is $300,000. See, don't even need to know how much life insurance she had. Doesn't need to know what the totals were. The question is, what is the most she could get from the Guarantee Association? And no matter what details are involved, the most she can get is $300,000. So it's not a guarantee of anything, is it? It's more of a safety net. Now, the number I want you to focus on is what's not there, okay? I want you to write down $100,000. $100,000. And I'm going to send you in an email the other numbers. Okay, because there's a different number for long-term care insurance. There's a different number for Medicare supplement insurance. And there's a different number for managed care plans. So I will send you out the list so you can read it and study from it. Not a lot. It's not a ton of stuff. But I'd rather have you have the list because I don't have it on my slides. But my point here is not so much the number, but understanding the concept. It's not a guarantee, is it? It's a safety net. In addition to that, what does that last bullet say? We can't discuss it. You and I are forbidden from discussing the fact that the Guarantee Association exists or that our company's policies might be covered under the Guarantee Association. We can't do it because they don't trust us how to explain to a customer how a guarantee is not a guarantee, because it's not. And the state feels that if we have a discussion with our company implying that our policies have the backing of a Guarantee Association, that might lead the customer to believe that another company does not. So they just they erase the board and say nobody can talk about it. So we can't talk about it either. We already talked about adverse underwriting. That's something we talked about earlier. Remember the risk selection process? You and I as field underwriters were the first person to deal with this. Home office underwriter responsible to protect the company from adverse selection. Nothing new there. Select, classify, and rate risks. Nothing new. Now, I'm going to send you a copy of a page. It's called Numbers, Dollars, Days, and Dates. And about 85% of the facts you need to know from the stuff we just covered is going to be on that attachment to the email. So I'd recommend you print it out and study from it. It's one of the few things I suggest you study outside of License Coach. It'll say numbers, dollars, days, and dates. So I'm going to give you 2 attachments. One with the limits on the association for health insurance, and the other one, numbers, dollars, days, and dates. So you'll have it. So we are not done. We have one more session to go through, but I want to take about a 15-minute break, and I'm going to reset up on my with the laws pertinent to health only, and we'll be back. So it's currently 10:35, so we'll be back here about 10 to 2. I mean, 10 to, not 10 to 2, about 10 to 11, 10 minutes to 11. So we'll be back. Have a quick break. Have a good break. Bye. Okie doke. We're back. And you can't hear me. Why can't you hear me? Huh. What's the problem here? Huh. Uh-huh. Okay. It's not working. Why is it? Oh, okay. I couldn't get my sound to work. Okay, I guess you can hear me. We're coming down the home stretch here. There's a good chance we'll be done before lunch. And I know that's going to upset you all, but I know you'll learn to live with it, okay? Virginia statutes and regulations common are pertinent to health only. We're going to talk a little bit about how the rules apply to Medicare supplement and long-term care insurance. Medicare supplement and long-term care insurance. When an insurance company puts a product out for med supp and long-term care, they look at what are they going to do? What do they have to concern themselves with? What are they going to do when that policy comes up for renewal? What are they going to do when it comes up for renewal? Some companies, most companies, use what's called the attained age method. Attained age method. Your attained age is your closest birthday within 6 months. So when a company uses the attained age rating method, the premiums will increase as you get older because you attain a new age. Some, very few, but some companies use what's called the issue age rating method. The issue age obviously is the age you were when the policy was originally issued. So if that is what they use, then the premiums do not increase as you get older. So the difference between these two, and they may give you some cockamamie question that uses this phrasing, attained age rating, issue age rating. It's all about what's going on with premium. And to say it differently, attained age rating really is another way of defining guaranteed renewable. Because if you think back, guaranteed renewable means the premiums increase as you get older. They can increase, they have to renew it, but the policy premiums can increase as you get older. And issue age rating is basically non-cancelable guaranteed renewable because the premiums can increase. So there's really nothing new here. There's just a different approach to the terminology. All long-term care policies and all Medicare supplement policies must be the type that have to be guaranteed renewable. We've already discussed what guaranteed renewable is. So long-term care policies and med supp policies must be at least guaranteed renewable. And neither of those policies can indemnify differently between accidents and sicknesses. So they can't say, well, we're going to pay you less if you get into an accident. No. They cannot indemnify differently between accidents and sickness. And no long-term care nor any Medicare supplement policies may ever duplicate any of Medicare's benefits. Because you've already got Medicare and then you're going to be paying it for it separately in another policy. No, they won't let that happen. So they're not allowed to duplicate Medicare. We already discussed the fact that long-term care policies and Medicare supplement policies have a 6-month pre-existing condition. We discussed that yesterday, where it can look back 6 months and then what? Deny coverage for that pre-existing condition for no more than 6 months. Guaranteed issue, we talked about that just a little bit ago this morning. We talked about someone who enrolls in Part B, a senior citizen who enrolls in Part B, has 6 months from the time they enroll in Part B to buy a Medicare supplement policy, and it's guaranteed to be issued. This applies only to Medicare supplement. It does not apply to long-term care policies. Only applies to Medicare supplement, not long-term care policies. So we've already discussed that as well. Advertising. Now here's where people get a little confused. We have to differentiate between advertising in general and partnership advertising. So please follow me as I go through this and take notes as you feel is appropriate. Now, whenever any insurance company wants to run any advertisement, I don't care what it's for, partnership, non-partnership, HMOs, PPOs, whatever, they want to run any ad, they are required to file a copy of that ad with the commissioner. You'll notice it says file a copy. It doesn't say get permission. So the insurance companies don't need to get permission before they run the ad. They just have to file a copy of the ad. If the commissioner doesn't like the ad, she'll tell them to pull the ad, okay? Also, the second bullet, all advertisements, no matter who created the ad, is ultimately the responsibility of the insurance company. So if I'm some insurance agent in Boise, Idaho, runs an ad in a church bulletin and it violates Idaho law, the insurance company is going to be responsible for that ad as far as the commissioner is concerned, not the agent. Now, the insurance company is going to take the agent to task, but we're talking about liability to the state. So the insurance company is ultimately responsible for any advertisements, no matter who runs them. In addition to that, I don't have this on my slide, so let's talk about it. You probably are familiar with what we call testimonials. There are lots of products that use testimonials, people telling you how much they love the product, okay? Well, anytime there's a testimonial used in the advertising of insurance, it must be the current opinion of the person making the statement, okay? So any testimony must be the current opinion. It just could show up on your test. Long-term care, we've already discussed the idea of premiums are tax deductible. There's nothing new there. Advertising, remember, any advertising, file for review. So whether it's any kind of long-term care, file for review. And retain for 3 years. So here now, let's slow down. We have two kinds of long-term care, don't we? One is called the partnership plan, that we just discussed a little bit ago, and the other I'll refer to as plain vanilla long-term care. It's the partnership plan the ads have to get for 4 years. But long-term care policies that are plain vanilla, other than partnership, the ad has to be kept for 3 years. Suitability. You and I as agents are required to make sure that anytime we sell a long-term care policy to a customer, we have to make sure it's a suitable product for their needs. We have to help them they have to fill out a questionnaire. Make sure they can pay for it. Make sure it meets their goals. If we're replacing it, we have to make sure that we are comparing the differences between the policies so the customer doesn't end up worse off than before we got there. Now, insurance companies provide us with questionnaires. The companies that sell this stuff will usually provide us with a questionnaire that we can use to help us determine the suitability. But it's our responsibility. That's where the question comes into play. And as we said, all long-term care policies must be guaranteed renewable. And when a policy is terminated by the insurance company, assuming it's possible, if they terminate it, any ongoing claims must be honored. We already talked about that. Now, this is one of the few times we have to do this when we go to visit somebody. Whenever we walk into somebody's home, or if they come to us and we're making a presentation about long-term care insurance, we're required to hand them a booklet, and that booklet is called the Shopper's Guide for Long-Term Care. We're required to hand it to them before we talk to them about long-term care. No other product are required to do that, but we are required to do it for long-term care. And the companies, by the way, give us as many of those as we need. We already talked about partnership plans, how they are used to help senior citizens, people who have money, stop taking advantage of the Medicaid system. They buy the policy, and then if they need long-term care, the money they spend, the money they get, the benefits they receive, every dollar's worth of benefit they receive allows them to set aside a dollar's worth of assets from the spend down provisions to qualify for Medicaid. Okay? And remember now, this is where they catch you sometimes. Medicaid is a state-by-state program. Each state has its own little deal. So if someone buys a Medicare, a long-term care partnership plan in Virginia, it's only honored in Virginia. North Carolina does not have to honor Virginia's promise. So you got to be a Virginia resident when you buy it, and you need to be a Virginia resident when you use it. As I said, it must provide inflation protection to keep that benefit somewhat on pace with the rising costs of inflation, so that that benefit will last the length of time it was designed to. And after all is said and done, when somebody has one of these partnership plans, and if they use it and it runs out, it exhausts, now they're going to apply for Medicaid because they have done what they were told to do. The state doesn't automatically give them or put them on Medicaid. The state is going to look around to make sure there are no assets in excess of the amount they're going to spend down. And as long as there are not, they qualify. If there are assets in excess of the amount that they can avoid spending down, they're going to have to spend down those assets. So they don't automatically qualify for Medicaid. The state wants to make sure that there aren't any excess assets out there. You and I, as agents, if we want to sell partnership plans, we must take certain courses. Every 24 months, it fits in very neatly with the biennium. Every 24 months, we're required to take courses. Initially, we must take an 8-hour course specifically designed to cover Virginia partnership plans. Then every 2 years thereafter, we must take a 4-hour refresher. Now, make a note. These hours are part of, not in addition to, your regular continuing education. So remember, we only have to do with your license, you're only going to have to do 16 hours. If you want to sell partnership plans, you don't have to pick up an extra 8 hours. You just pick up 8 hours as part of your 16. So part of, not in addition to. And advertising. Again, file for review, but because they're partnership plans, I made this point earlier, they have to keep those ads, insurance companies have to keep those ads for 4 years. So plain vanilla, long-term care, they keep the ads for 3. Partnership long-term care, they keep the ad for 4. They always have to file for review. They don't have to get permission. And then training records have to be kept for 5 years. So we're coming back around kind of full circle, aren't we? Forget the list on page 67. I should get rid of that. Here's what's important right here. You and I, whenever we're dealing with the senior citizen, have to be very careful we don't mislead them in any way. As far as the Bureau of Insurance is concerned, senior citizens are a protected species. We are not, I'm one of them, so we are not endangered. There are more of us every day, but we are a protected species. So we cannot ever imply to a senior citizen that we have some special certification that gives us special abilities. Like we can't say, well, I'm a senior specialist, a retirement advisor, or planner. Can't do that. You're an insurance agent. FAMOUS. FAMOUS is another one of these acronyms that the government likes to use. FAMOUS is an acronym that stands for Family Access to Medical Insurance Security Plan. FAMIS. FAMOUS. Now, what is it? Well, it's health insurance for kids from poor families, but only up to the age of 19. They have to be residents of Virginia, but how do we measure poor? Well, in this case, that family income has to be at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. So if somebody has some kids and their income is at or below 200% of the poverty level, and if those kids are under the age of 19, they would qualify for health insurance under FAMOUS. The rest of those bullets are not important. So what does that slide say? End. Guess what? We're done. Are you excited? Probably not. You love hanging out. The rest, if you may have it, not important. I have eliminated the stuff that isn't important. Remember, I just told you I took the health exam a little bit ago. So I've tried to make clear this up so we have just cut to the chase. Now, before you all disappear on me, has anybody, Kayla, I know you have not received the email about Licensed Coach. I will get that to you. Is there anyone who has not, other than Kayla, who has not received their email about Licensed Coach? Please let me know. I'm going to unmute everybody. Is there anyone who has not received their access to Licensed Coach? Okay, I'm going to assume you got it. Kayla, you'll get one in a few minutes. I have to register you. So what's your next step? Put your books and your notes away. Put your books and your notes away. Log into Licensed Coach and go to work on Licensed Coach. Follow the instructions I gave you on the attachment that came with Licensed Coach. Print it out and follow those instructions. Hey, Anjan, you got a war going on over there? What's all that noise in the background? My God, I'm gonna mute you. Okay, it's tough. The background noise gets very loud. So get on Licensed Coach and print out that attachment I gave you and follow it the way I told you to follow it. And you will be ready to take this test. You should pass it the first time, no later than Wednesday or Thursday of this coming week. Get after it. If you have any questions between now and then, you have my access. You have access to me. I would ask that if you're going to call me, don't call me before 8 in the morning or after 8 at night. I might have already mentioned it, but I want to make sure I mention it again. So don't be calling me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, okay? So between 8 and 8 is the time I'll take phone calls. If it's outside of those hours, text me. If I'm up, I'll call you back. I want to help you. Go ahead.
How do we sign up for this test?
Well, management is going to help you get signed up for the test. That's their job. Okay. Yeah, they're going to work with you and set a test date and let you know because you've already paid them the fees. That's a great question. Yeah, they're going to get that organized for you. You should know, I'm guessing by a Monday or Tuesday when your test date is, which is why you don't want to dilly-dally. You've got the weekend to really go after this, a Licensed Coach, and just go after it like no tomorrow. Great question. Any other questions? All right. Well, it's been my pleasure. If you have any problems, call me. Kayla, watch for that extra email I'm going to send you. And by the way, I may send out other emails to y'all that you might find helpful. God bless you. Appreciate your time and your attendance. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.